The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hi, and welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet, a weekly program providing you the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually. I'm your host, Kibin, Alleyne. Coming up, over 800,000 students statewide rely on free public school lunch and breakfast programs. Now, funding for federal school lunch program may expire this June, leaving many children hungry. The New York School Nutrition Association joins me to discuss this matter. How will losing this funding affect our students? Then, according to the U.S. Bureau of Statistics, around 600,000 teachers in public education have left the profession, and more are expected to leave as uncertainty and stress following the pandemic remains. A school teacher joins me to discuss the patterns we're seeing inside the classroom. Why are so many teachers leaving their profession? After that, following the events of the Russian invasion, New Yorkers and organizations like the New York Blood Center have found ways to send support to the Ukraine. The New York Blood Center joined me to discuss their partnership with Global Blood Fund and their efforts to support Ukrainians. And finally, FoodStream Network is calling on state representatives to refund the $25 million Restaurant Resiliency Program, also known as RRP. The program is just one of many efforts to address food insecurity in our city. How will our city be affected due to the lack of funding? So stay tuned. Open BxRx Tuesday starts now. Welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kibin, Alleyne, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. It's a resource thousands of children depend on throughout the school year: free school breakfast and lunches. Access to free lunch and breakfast feeds over 800,000 students statewide. However, funding for the federal school lunch program may expire this June, leaving many children hungry. Joining me to discuss the importance of preserving free school meals is Naim Walcott from New York School Nutrition Association. Naim, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about the federal school lunch program?
Yes, so the federal school lunch program is essentially a program in the federal government that reimburses students or reimburses school nutrition programs for each meal that they serve to children. Those meals have to meet certain nutritional criteria. The procurement of the foods, the paper goods, all of that is under strict regulation. And that it's overseen in New York State by the New York State Education Department currently.
Now, how has this program been essential to public schools across the city?
Well, essentially they are doing exactly what it sounds like. They're allowing students to come in, get a breakfast, a lunch, in some cases after school snack, depending on what parts of the program a district might be participating in, at no charge. They're able to get one breakfast and one lunch. What this does is it takes money and financial status out of the feeding of children. It takes away the social stigma of going into the line. And really, it's really kind of like an equity issue. It's across the board, fair for everybody. School lunches are literally the most super or over-regulated meals that a child's going to have. They're literally the healthiest meal that a kid's going to get on a day-to-day basis.
Now, I feel like this kind of highlights another issue, which is food insecurity. And that issue has garnered a lot of attention in recent years, especially since the pandemic. How will the closure of this program contribute to that?
Well, it's a big deal. For example, I believe on April 12th, Mike Winters on CNBC just posted an article stating that food prices have gone up, I believe it's 8.8% in the past 6 months alone. We're already experiencing gas price increases. I know that there's some legislation trying to bring that down. But the bottom line is American families are paying more everywhere. And food insecurity is impacting them. Not only do we not want students to have to try to pony up for meals in the school environment, we don't want to have the entire stress or anxiety aspect of going in. And now, a good way to put this is New York has a anti-shaming policy for school meals. So for 2 years, there's been no money needed to get a school lunch. So now all of a sudden, if we repeal this, to my point, you're going to now be able to identify the students that have money and those that don't, and it's going to be glaring obvious.
Now, what could the aftermath of this look like? Now, I'm imagining, will schools just not provide any food to the kids throughout the day if they don't have the money to pay for it?
No. Schools and school nutrition programs will ensure that children get fed. That would be that's my imagination. Where this goes is those meals cost something. They cost something for the labor. They cost something to procure and produce those meals. And what's not known is that school nutrition programs are not funded by a district's general fund. They're funded by selling school lunch. So when we're talking about these universal meals, what we're seeing is, okay, yes, we're being reimbursed by the state and federal government in order to provide those meals. Once we take that away, and we're still providing the meal, these programs are going to need financial assistance in order to continue to buy food and continue to pay for the labor required to produce it.
Now, if the funding is cut, as I mentioned earlier, this will leave over 800,000 students statewide without the option for free breakfast and lunch. Do you know of any resources available to help families who can't afford just to pay for lunch or school lunch daily?
Well, other than programs like WIC programs, and unfortunately shelter programs, to my knowledge, school nutrition and school the National School Lunch Program in a school district is by far the best and the gold standard for feeding children. Not only is every program that is receiving those reimbursements following the federal meal program waivers, but they're following nutritional guidelines for that as well. So anything less than that puts a student at a loss. And if you're equating that, when you're talking about breakfast and lunch, you're talking about all of the key ingredients to a healthy diet, from whole grains, protein, fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, low-fat milk. Those are big deals for a child. And I don't know of any programs that provide quite the blanket and meet all the targets the way school nutrition does.
Now, there are so many moving parts, and I think that everyday people tend to think that it's the school that's doing this, and they don't know who's actually responsible. Can you just tell us who's responsible for this type of funding?
Who's responsible? So the funding is essentially coming from the state and the federal government. Most of that is from the federal government. The federal government also assists school nutrition programs by doing things like direct diversion and brown box. These are methods to bring the cost of foods down by teaming up with manufacturers and distributors to make sure that we're able to keep doing what we're doing in the most cost-effective manner possible. I don't know if I answered your question.
Now, can you tell me who are the people who will be most affected by this?
Okay, yes. Most affected. Right now, it's going to be students, and it'll be students coming to the food service lines. But also, that's who's impacted. This is the food service workers. The food service workers, again, everything in school food is paid for by selling school food. So that money is going to the salaries of the food service workers. That money is going to custodial staff that might be in the kitchen. That money goes to equipment in the kitchens. It goes to everything from paper goods to the actual food that's being produced. So from soup to nuts, it's the labor and everybody that depends on these jobs is going to be impacted. But it's also, and primarily, it's going to be the students that are coming in and experiencing a different or a tiered type of experience at the lunch lines.
Now, I guess switching gears a little bit, can you tell me how is access to a nutritious meal at school beneficial to a child's learning environment?
Oh, absolutely. I don't have the studies offhand, I apologize. But there are numerous studies that basically state that a well-fed child performs better. They perform better cognitively, they perform better socially, they perform better athletically. They're able to concentrate more. They have more energy to do the things that is required of them. Just across the board, good nutrition. You put good things in, you're going to get good things out. And we see that in its impact on children.
Now, federal waivers are set to expire June 30th of this year. Do you think there's actually enough time to combat this?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We have seen our state government and our federal government respond very quickly to various challenges and various priorities that have been put in front of them. And I don't see why feeding children, American children, would be any different. You know, the waivers expiring is going to impact a lot of families. Any family that's got a child, any community that's got children in their district, it's going to be impacted by this. So it's vitally important.
Now, can you tell me a little bit more about your organization?
Sure. So I am part of the School Nutrition Association, which is the national platform. But I'm served as the vice president of the New York State School Nutrition Association. And what we are and what we do is we basically are the advocacy arm of child nutrition. We want to be the informational hub and the resource hub for this industry. We've done everything from partnering with our industry partners, manufacturers, farm to school advocates, and that touches all the way to farmers in New York State to not only support the previous governor's proposals, but to get those New York State products and produce into schools and make them as possible, but also by bolstering our local economies as well. The New York State School Nutrition Program has been essential in some of the legislation actions that have come across the plate. Everything from backing the New York initiative to getting an additional 25 cents from the state to help fund meals for children.
Can you quickly just let everybody know how to access your social media?
Yeah, I mean, you just go to, you can go onto our website, which is the New York School Nutrition Association, and there are links there and information there from everything from YouTube, I believe we're on TikTok. I'm not sure on that. So, but yeah, all of our social media can be accessed through our webpage at the New York State School Nutrition Association.
All right, Naim, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
Welcome back. Following the stress and uncertainty around the pandemic, more teachers across the country are resigning. Teachers began leaving classrooms in 2020, and according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, around 600,000 teachers in public education quit between January 2020 and March 2022. Before we jump into it, let's take a look at this quick clip.
Recent surveys show that as many as half of all teachers are thinking about leaving teaching. Half of all teachers are thinking of leaving. Let's just say we lose 25% of those teachers. 1 out of every 4 teacher leaves. Currently, there are 4.4 million teachers in the U.S. If we lose 25%, that comes to 1.1 million teachers.
Joining me now to discuss the pattern we're seeing is educator and advocate Nicholas Ferroni. Nicholas, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Obviously, you're in my classroom with me, so just got done with my school day.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Now, can you tell me about your experience working as a teacher and educator?
I always wanted to be a teacher. I had amazing teachers who inspired me to pursue this field. But I will be honest, when I became a teacher, I didn't realize the business or bureaucracy of being an educator. I didn't realize that half the stuff I used in my classroom, my teachers bought. I didn't realize that they were working on their own time. I didn't realize that they were working other jobs in order to sustain their living so they could continue being a teacher. So my experience in my 19 years, it is the best job in the world. I love every day. I feel like I have 100 little brothers and sisters who I get to mentor, who inspire me daily. If teaching was my only job, it would be the best profession in the world. At the same time, it feels like that teaching is kind of irrelevant for everything else that teachers have to endure, deal with, and even do on a regular basis.
Now, as many of us know, the pandemic has made teaching so much more of a challenge. Can you explain the shift you've seen since teaching during the pandemic?
We saw a shift very quickly of once we went virtual, people began to appreciate teachers. You don't appreciate what you have till you don't have it. And like we noticed with statistics, we are losing a lot of people in this profession. But then we saw a quick shift back to go back to work, to do your job, to stop complaining, to just continue to endure everything that teachers have done throughout their entire existence. I mean, teachers have gone above and beyond forever, and the pandemic kind of exacerbated and exposed all the things that teachers have done above and beyond our contractual obligations that people just now expect us to do. And the pandemic was a blessing for a short period of time, and now it's just kind of a downward spiral for educators and education in general. I mean, the system is crumbling as we speak.
Now, you kind of touched on that. Because of many of these challenges, we are seeing teachers who are deciding to leave the profession entirely. As someone who is so passionate about the work that you do, what were your initial thoughts on this finding?
Well, I've updated my resume for the first time in 19 years, which to me, what does it say about society, or what does it say about this in general when you have people who always dreamed of becoming a teacher are leaving their dream jobs? There's not another profession where people dreamed of pursuing that field and they're leaving because the field has become so toxic and unbearable. In my current role as an educator now, it's like I love my job, I love my district, but things, if they're not going to change, the system's going to literally come crumbling down because we've maintained it for so long. My heart goes out to the teachers who are forced to choose between doing something they love and their livelihood. And it says so much. And I don't think that's what people realize. When a teacher says they're leaving teaching and they say it's the toughest thing they've ever had to do, believe them. Because for us, it's not a job. It's not something that we just can kind of pack up and move on. We feel like we're letting down our families, our students' families, our students, and it's just something we've always dreamed of doing. So when teachers say that leaving teaching is the toughest thing, I would believe them, because for most of us it is. The thought of me even leaving the classroom it keeps me up. It breaks my heart. And so many educators are broken by having to make that decision, but they're being forced to do so.
Now, as we can see on this map, the teacher shortage has already begun to affect more states than others. With the way things are going, do you expect to see the number of teachers leaving rise in other states as well?
I mean, come September, I feel like in the South, it's probably more prominent than in the North. And based on the map you're showing, kind of states that as well. But come September, there's going to be a great exodus. There's going to be, it's not a teacher shortage, it's teacher attrition. Teachers are being forced out of this profession. They're being forced to choose between survival or dealing with everything else that we've endured for so long. And on top of that, now the political attacks, now the weaponization of educators, now the demonization of educators. We see that on such a large scale. My concern is come September, I mean, we're going to see an exodus like we've never seen before. And my concern and my fear is that it's too late by then. If you are forcing people who always dreamed of being teachers out of teaching, there is no chance you will convince people to become educators who never want to be an educator.
Wow, that's really powerful, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that. A little bit earlier, you also talked about just kind of a toxic environment. Can you detail what you mean by toxic and how it can actually be toxic for people who are working in that environment?
I mean, there's so many levels of toxicity in education, whether it's the fact that teachers are expected or even have to work a second job in order to maintain their livelihoods because they can't survive solely on their teaching salary. The fact that it's acceptable for teachers to pay for their own supplies or beg for their supplies online, which we have to do because it's either we beg for them online through different sites or we buy them ourselves, or the fact that parents are showing up to board meetings attacking teachers and claiming they're doing things they're not doing, yet they don't have that same energy when their child's teacher is either working an extra job or paying for supplies for their child in their classroom. We just see the toxicity developing on people are attacking teachers who dedicated their lives to the success and happiness of other people's children, but for some reason are being used as political tools and ways to scapegoat and to create problems that are non-existent. When all we do every single day is want every one of our students to feel, first of all, feel secure, feel stable emotionally, physically, and just to know that they're nurtured and cared for. And educated. So we want every student to walk in our classroom and feel like they know they exist, they matter, and to empower them. We're not trying to indoctrinate them. We're not trying to undermine parents. We work with parents. We want to assist parents and guardians into the success of their child. And the fact that parents and guardians are believing politicians over somebody who spends 180 days with their child, to me, it is so mind-blowing.
Now, you touched on it a little bit, and it's the issue of pay. You posted an article on Twitter about this, and we learned that 41% of K-12 teachers work another job just to make ends meet. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, I would honestly think the statistic is much higher because a lot of teachers like myself would bartend or do jobs that pay in cash, so that may not be calculated in that survey. At the same time, a lot of teachers work other jobs within the school system. So they advise, they coach, they tutor, they run other programs. So, I mean, I would honestly bet that stat is probably closer to 60 or 70%. On average, I work 3 jobs. I'm working 2 jobs right now. I create content, I edit, I blog, I do presentations. So I work 3 jobs right now, and I do fairly well for an educator. I live in New Jersey. We get paid pretty well. It's very common for teachers to donate blood, to drive Uber, to Airbnb their extra rooms out, just to try to find every single way they can to supplement their income. And it's interesting enough where if you look at college majors, teaching, which most people would argue is probably one of the most important professions and careers we need to sustain a functioning society, ranks 49th out of 50 on most starting pay or average pay college degrees. And that in itself is a problem. Teachers do not want to be millionaires. I do not want to be a millionaire, but it'd be nice if I only had to focus on teaching. And I think the irony is, like, I'm wearing a shirt that says teachers are underpaid because we do not value the work of women. I'm 24 or 25% in a field dominated by women. And I didn't experience sexism until I became a teacher because it just showed me how much we do not value the work of women because it is a predominantly female-dominated field. So that was an interesting eye-opening experience for myself as well. But teachers, it's state to state, it varies. At the same time, I have friends who have a doctorate degree with 25 years experience who are barely making above the poverty line in certain states in the South.
Now, what are your fears if this continues to happen?
You know, we don't really appreciate something or someone until they're gone. The public education system is going to come crumbling down. And what schools are going to do is they're going to probably do the quick fix where they're going to lower the standards to become educators. They're going to lower the pay or try to even increase the pay to recruit more people. But they're going to fill positions with people who do not want to be there, who are solely doing it for the pay or solely doing it because they have nothing else to do. And then, which they're not going to give their heart, their soul, their passion to it. They won't be qualified to do it. We see a lot of school districts trying to beg people to come to this field with no experience. So if schools do not pay their current teachers more money to retain them, increase their salaries, increase their salary scales, we're going to see the whole system fall apart. And to me, public education is the one investment that benefits everyone. It is the center of every community. If we do not invest in teachers, if we do not invest in schools, then I hate to say it, but it's like that's the downfall of society. And I'm not being dramatic. I'm just being honest. You know, parents can't privatize. They can't pay for certain schooling. They can't homeschool their children.
Now, I know what you're saying. A lot of teachers have felt the same way. However, a lot of them fear speaking up because they believe it will result in retaliation. Have you seen or experienced this? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
For every post I make or every comment I make, I probably get 1,000 messages from teachers saying, I can't say this publicly, but this is what my concern is. This is what we're dealing with. There are teachers who are so afraid to share what's going on because they know that they'll be punished for just sharing their reality. And I'm luckily in a position, I work in a great district. I'm extremely supportive of my administration. To me, it's like when I share concerns, they're not personally always my concerns. They're more of a collective concern because I try to provide a space for teachers to share and know they're not alone. But people think, you know, First Amendment rights apply. They don't, not to teachers, because God forbid a teacher says something and then either a parent complains about it or an administrator sees it, they will be reprimanded. If they're not fired, they will be punished in some way. Even school districts have their teachers sign, you know, privacy issues or privacy contracts where they can't say anything about the school or the district or anything that happens within the school on social media. And to me, that's a problem as well. So many teachers are forced into silence. So, which then brings the argument that people attacking teachers are very loud and plenty of teachers can't even defend themselves. If a parent criticizes them, a teacher can't even defend themselves publicly. So therefore, people only see the negative message, which is why I feel obligated to share any form of support.
So I appreciate that so much. Can you quickly just let everybody know how they can actually stay up to date with you on social media?
Well, you can follow me at Nicholas Ferroni, which is NichOlas Ferroni on Twitter and Instagram. And for information and entertainment, it's at Mr. Ferroni for TikTok, which now I obviously have to be involved into, which my students tricked me into getting into. But yeah, it's just, I mean, support. You don't have to have a child to support public schools or public school teachers.
Nicholas, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your honesty, and I think what you're saying could help so many other teachers out there. So I really appreciate it.
I hope so. Thank you for allowing me to say it. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.
know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BxRx, this is Andrea.
Welcome back. February 24th marked the day Ukraine saw an attack from the Russian military. Following the events of the invasion, New York and organizations across the city have found ways to send support to Ukraine. One of those organizations is the New York Blood Center. Andrea, Cefarelli, Senior Executive Director for Donor Recruitment and Marketing, joined me to discuss their partnership with Global Blood Fund and their effort to support Ukrainian refugees. Andrea, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So the New York Blood Center is partnering with Global Blood Fund to support their efforts in the Ukraine. Can you just explain how this collaboration actually began?
Sure. We've had a long-standing collaboration with Global Blood Fund, and we're always looking for new ways to raise awareness for the need for blood. And the Global Blood Fund was working on helping refugees find homes, and we thought it was just a perfect synergy between our two organizations and a great way to partner for the month.
Now, can you tell me a little bit more about the effort that kickstarted the collaboration?
Sure. Global Blood Fund has been around for a long time, and they look for ways to help other countries that don't have all the advantages that the U.S. does, even though it's been really hard during the pandemic, to meet the needs of hospitals and patients needing blood. And so the partnership, if you give blood for this month and you express your interest, we'll do a donation on your behalf to the Global Blood Fund, which has what's called a rehoming project. And they're working on making it easier for refugees to find places to live.
Now, donating blood is a huge way to support. Can you just explain what the requirements for donating blood are?
Yeah, most people find it easier than they think, but you have to be well and healthy, and it seems like flu is going around right now and lots of pollen in the air, but you have to feel well and healthy. And then it takes about an hour. So you have to bring identification, and then you fill out a questionnaire, and then we take your vitals, your blood pressure, your iron, check out your questionnaire. Then the act of giving blood is actually only about 15 minutes long, and the last part of giving blood is enjoying juice and cookies, which is the best part.
Now, how will this effort support people in Ukraine? And I guess this can go for a lot of the efforts from like places like the New York Blood Center. How does that support people?
So it's we're helping build the software, or the Global Blood Fund is partnering with some tech wizards on building software to match up refugees with people that are willing to house them. And so our money goes to Global Blood Fund, which, as I said, has a long history of helping out countries that don't have the same advantages with providing blood and blood products to their hospital.
Can you actually tell me a little bit more about the rehoming program?
I don't know that much because it's in the very infantile stages. We really essentially put together this program in about 3 days.
Oh, wow.
And so they're creating a site where I think the refugees can either connect with family, relatives, or people that are willing to open up their homes. And so we hope to hear more as it develops. And like I said, Global Blood Fund has a long history of helping in this way, and we thought it was good to get in on the early days.
Now, can you explain the importance of these humanitarian efforts from organizations like the New York Blood Center? I did a little bit of research and I saw that you guys also did stuff way back in 2010 with Haiti, and I'm sure it goes even further than that. Can you just explain like why doing this type of work is so important?
Well, I think we believe New York Blood Center kind of stands alone as an organization that does a tremendous amount of research, and we save lives every day. But there are so many organizations that we benefit from hosting blood drives that we think it's extremely important to look for these synergies and partnerships. So if there's a portion of the country that is devastated by a hurricane and we can send blood and blood products, we do that. During the pandemic, we were the first collectors of convalescent plasma, which was one of the early treatments for COVID, and we sent it to 42 states and several countries. In March, we did the Save One, Feed One campaign, where we partnered with food banks, which had the same sort of hardship during the pandemic. So we think these synergies add benefit to people who are already doing good work, but can sort of raise it up a notch.
Now, can you explain, as I mentioned, you guys have done this before. Why are these efforts so important to public health specifically? Because I don't think people often think that these could be public health issues. Can you explain how they kind of work together or go hand in hand?
Yeah, so people don't think about blood and blood products until they need them or one of their loved ones needs them. And like I said, we rely on so many organizations to support us because blood is donated, and you donate through your place of work, place of worship, your school, your college, or the New York Mets, the New York Yankees. And so we think it's really important to provide opportunities to give back to the community. We have scholarships for our high schools and colleges, and this kind of fits in with that overall do good messaging.
And can you actually tell me a little bit more about the New York Blood Center, just in general?
Sure. We've been around for almost 60 years. We provide blood and blood products to about 200 hospitals. Blood is perishable. It only lasts about 42 days. And so you need a constant supply. And the pandemic has kind of decimated the way in which we collect blood. We are returning a bit to normal, but we had 2 years with almost no youth donors and no first-time donors. And we typically have 500 high school blood drives a year. So, we provide about 367,000 red cells to hospitals and patients, and about 80,000 platelets, which go to cancer patients, leukemia patients, things like that.
Now, how can viewers watching do their part to support, and how can they register?
So donate blood or present to donate, and then you just have to go to our landing page and show your interest. So it's just less than a minute to do that, and then we'll make the donation at the end of the month. So super simple. And if you've never donated before, it's really easy.
Now, I think this is super important. Is there any restrictions with someone giving blood, especially now that we're kind of in the wake of COVID?
So you have to be well and healthy. So even symptoms, if you just have allergies or cold-like or COVID-like symptoms, you should not even present to donate. But other than that, well and healthy. And on our website at nybc.org, we have the most common reasons why you might not be able to give, or temporary reasons. But most people are surprised to find out that they're eligible. And if you eat and are well hydrated, you should have a great experience. An hour later, save a life of someone you'll never meet.
Now, Andrea, thank you so much for joining me. Before you go, can you just tell everyone how can they actually stay up to date with your organization?
Yeah, so we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. So definitely visit our website. It's super easy to find a place to donate. You can search by zip code. So we hope that you're listening. And if you can't donate, if you're not eligible, you can host a blood drive. You might have an idea of gathering friends together, or you and your family go to a donor center together. So lots of ways to help.
All right, Andrea, thank you so much for joining. And once again, I think this is an amazing effort to support the people who really need it.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
Welcome back. Food insecurity remains an issue for many New Yorkers. In an effort to combat that, organization FoodStream Network is calling state representatives to refund the $25 million restaurant resiliency program. Joining me to discuss the importance of this effort is co-founder of FoodStream Network, Rich Cumming. Rich, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about your organization, FoodStream Network?
Of course, yeah. FoodStream advocates for the development of all sustainable food insecurity solutions, as well as the local food economy. The purpose of the platform is to transform the way food moves through our communities in need, It's a digital networking platform for all organizations in the food relief space, such as farms, restaurants, community groups, and nonprofits. The technology enables rapid connection and collaboration between thousands of organizations working locally toward the health, wealth, and prosperity of our neighborhoods through nourishing, culturally relevant food. I think since launching in 2021, we have just under 500 New York State restaurants, community organizations, and farms signed up as members. And through the platform, we have found funding for countless food providers, enabling them to provide fresh produce and meals for thousands of New Yorkers. And we have activated restaurants members to provide hot meals for hundreds of families displaced through fires. And we activate multiple minority farmers to provide hundreds and thousands of pounds of fresh produce to Bronx-based neighborhoods that have extremely limited access to affordable food.
Now, your most recent effort is the refunding of the $25 million restaurant resiliency program. Unfortunately, we learned that it actually didn't make it into the budget, but can you tell us what is the mission behind this program?
Yeah, well, the overall mission, really, the goal was to provide food for vulnerable communities by having restaurants paid to prepare those meals and provide those meals to food pantries at an agreed upon price. The emphasis here was placed on the meals being nourishing, nutritious, healthy, and culturally relevant. The restaurants would benefit from the consistent business, whilst the people would receive high quality meals 2 to 5 times a week.
Now, this effort supports New York's network of food banks and emergency food providers. We saw an increased need for these resource outlets during the pandemic. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, sure. There was an increased need for emergency food assistance during the pandemic, especially amongst the most vulnerable of our communities, most at risk, unable to leave their homes, unable to work, or to access the benefits that many more privileged folks could. Millions of people were going hungry, and actually they continue to do so. Overall, since 2020, global food prices have increased by 75%. And now we're facing a new crisis from the war in Europe, where just recently our global food prices increased again over 18%, making like a nourishing meal even further out of reach to many of our communities, and actually not just those typically considered as vulnerable.
Now, this effort focuses on prepared meals from restaurants, and you said that. Can you explain how these options support those in need comparison to, let's say, food giveaways, food drives, stuff like that?
Yeah. Prepared cooked meals offers a lifeline to many folks who don't have access to kitchens. They don't really know how to probably cook healthy meals. And those families who parents juggling multiple jobs as well as children simply don't have the time to cook meals for their families. The New York State Restaurant Resiliency Program put $25 million into our restaurant economy. 320 restaurants applied, 160 restaurants were funded, 22 of those were in the Bronx, and over 1 million meals were provided. So the funds were not a handout. The restaurants brought the food, the money paid for their staff and made hundreds of meals for New Yorkers in need. It was mostly a very successful program, but more importantly, it highlighted that there are new models and solutions to tackling food insecurity, or this food insecurity crisis that we're going through now, and should be supported. For this reason, it was a very disappointing blow for us that the meals weren't, that the program wasn't refunded. The difference really between the food giveaways and the food drives, we quite often see that food giveaways and food drives provide meals that aren't necessarily considered, aren't necessarily culturally relevant, aren't necessarily fresh, and quite often we see quite a lot of food waste in those scenarios. Also, the food that is either given away or donated or purchased from out-of-state sources and therefore does not really support the local economy.
Can you actually highlight the culturally sensitive or culturally relevant food? I think that's super important, and I've heard that a lot in regards to just giving out meals. Can you explain why that's important?
I think it's easy to describe if we think about restaurants. Restaurants are the cornerstone of our culture, of our cultures, of our community. They purposely make food for their community. Otherwise, they'd get out of business if they didn't. Therefore, they are the meals that they prepared are aligned to the culture that they serve. So, I mean, in Queens, for example, you've got a huge melting pot there of all sorts of different cultures. So it's important to identify which restaurants should provide food for which culture. And in doing so, you guarantee that no food goes to waste and the people that receive the meals receive it with dignity and enjoyment, just as if their family cooked that meal themselves.
I love that more organizations are paying attention to that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Right here in the Bronx, we experience the highest rates of food insecurity statewide. How will our city be affected by the lack of funding now?
Well, the food relief industry is a multi-dollar business. Yet 42 million Americans go hungry every day, including 17% children. Neither of these numbers are going up or down. Sorry, neither of these numbers are going down. And you just think, how is our future generation supposed to do well in school, work, and life when all they're thinking about is where the next meal is coming from? Despite the Bronx being home to one of the largest food markets in the country, a New York City public agency spending $500 million on food and serving approximately 230 million meals a year, 2.9 million state residents struggle against hunger every day. And a large number of those residents are in the Bronx. I think as a city, we do have spending power to transform our local and regional food systems, and more work needs to be done and is being done to bring all those groups together to work together to find more sustainable solutions to food insecurity, which is why platforms like FoodStream and initiatives like the RRP are so important, as they offer a new look at supporting local economies as well as most vulnerable communities.
And can you actually talk about the other efforts your organization focuses on? I know there's something with farms and gardens and community groups. You also talked about paying attention just to the local community. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that we're working on. We're working with FIPS neighborhoods in the Bronx and potential funders who can sponsor weekend meal packs for kids who rely on school meals for their only source of nourishment. We also continue to work with upstate farms to help them create sustainable solutions and keep them funded to provide fresh produce for their local food pantries. And more excitingly, we're working with the state initiative called the Restaurant Meals Program, which will enable restaurants to accept SNAP and EBT credits. This is huge and puts the spending power into the hands of household residents that are eligible for these benefits.
And can you explain how much the state budget actually affects food insecurity in the Bronx specifically?
I mean, the state and city budgets are crucial to the lifeline of the Bronx. More access to affordable, culturally relevant meals is essential to the health, wealth, and prosperity of our neighborhoods. In some areas in the Bronx, there are 64 bodegas to just one grocery store. And in many districts, folks have to take a bus to purchase fresh food. The funding of new initiatives such as the RRP and the RMP could go a very long way to addressing some of these needs.
And how can a restaurant who wants to be a part of this effort join? Do you have any, tips or ways that if they want to help out their community, they can?
Well, yeah, I would very simply go to foodstreamnetwork.com. Very simple steps to become a member. It's a free platform. As I say, we have over 500 members. and the platform can be used to interact with and engage with other organizations in the community, in your local community. And we do all sorts of things to help provide information and resources that really help restaurants sort of activate in the community and sort of benefit it economically as well.
Rich, thank you so much for joining us. And I really love speaking to you about this. And I love the direction that a lot of these organizations are taking to help people who are dealing with food insecurity. Can you just tell us your social media?
Oh, yeah. My social media, or our social media, is FoodStream_network.
All right. Thank you so much.
That's on Instagram. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
That's all for our show today. I'm Kibin and Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.